Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for policy inheritance. I'm Crystal Hinkle. I'm part of the team here at Synchro, and I will let Andy introduce himself.
Hey, everybody, I'm Andy. I'm on the product team here at Synchro.
Yes, and so we are very excited today. So policy inheritance has been a work in progress. Andy and the entire team, really, all of our developers, our engineers, our product team have been working really hard on policy inheritance. What I will say, just a little bit of just kind of information to kick us off is that we do use the Q&A. So I have disabled chat just because it's hard for us to kind of keep track of all the questions that are coming in. If I have any content that I want to throw into chat, I will do that as well. But if you guys can use the Q&A for any questions. Now, I will say Andy does a phenomenal job going through policy inheritance. And so just to kind of give you a heads up of what you're going to see is not only just the feature and functionality of what policy inheritance is, but Andy will cover all of the transition aspects as well. So what does it look like for you? Because I'm sure most of you are here to just kind of understand how it's going to impact you, how it's going to impact your instance. And so we will cover all of those things today as well. So without further ado, I think we can just kind of hand it on over to Andy.
Well, thanks, Crystal. Welcome, everybody. Synchro folks, and then folks that are on this webinar that might be on another platform today and kind of curious to see what Synchro is about, especially this new big feature release I'm going to talk about. And I just want to give like a 30-second kind of history on policy inheritance. We heard from a lot of folks, particularly larger MSPs, that this was our existing policy model was a little bit difficult to work with the more complex of a customer you started to bring on, whether it be like a sprawling office complex that had a whole significant amount of required policies amongst all their assets, or if you had a customer that might have even been national with offices all over the country, having to duplicate policies and then try and manage them properly on these complex customers became a bit of a burden. And we really kind of thought, we went back to the basics and thought, we can kind of make some general improvements, some policy overrides and things like that. We said, you know what, screw it, we're just going to redo the entire system. And one thing that's going to be, you'll see in a second, but one thing that's great about this is we really wanted to build a system that you could never grow out of, no matter how big you got. And then on top of that, we wanted to build a system that you could, excuse me, that you could never struggle to grow into, meaning no matter how big or how small you are, this is going to work equally well in both instances. So give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So for Synchro folks that are used to this system as it is today, I'm going to refer to what you're seeing as our old policy model. For you all, it'll be the current model until a couple days from now, which we are going to start doing limited deploys, which means we're going to grab a couple hundred users a day and begin rolling this out. And then we expect that to take anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks. Don't quote me. It may go better, may go a little worse, just depending. But it should be about 3 weeks from today. I think everybody should have it at that point. For existing Synchro folks, once this is rolled out, you're going to get an in-app notification letting you know exactly what happened, exactly what to do, and where to go if you have questions. But what we're looking at today is the old policy model. This is an actual Synchro policy. And one of the things we really wanted to look to improve was the overall usability of this form. So as an example, this policy is aptly named Splash Top. All it does is enable our native Splash Top integration. But in order to find that out, I have to cycle through a bunch of different things that is enabled on this policy or not enabled on this policy, just to kind of find what it's actually doing. So none of this stuff is active. It's just things I can turn on within the policy. This is all that's actually being turned on. But again, I kind of have to scroll through a bunch of things to sift through that. So now this is what the new builder looks like. This is a completely streamlined and revamped UI. And the first thing you'll notice is you don't actually see anything because this is a new policy. It's not actually doing anything. This new model works effectively in reverse, where instead of showing you everything it does and you have to implicitly check these different items to turn them on, now you can add. It's all additive. So you add whatever you want. So if you want to add some alerts, for instance, you could go in here and say, cool, I'm going to add some alerts. Sorry. And you can pick from this selected list of anything you want to add, and it'll just start getting added to the policy. If you want to remove it, super easy, just hit the X and it'll remove it. You can remove entire sections as well with the X. As you're adding individual items, you can kind of see over here, it's going to start counting how many sections that you've added to each given category. So if I want to add splash top, for instance, now you can see that I've got one section here added for remote access. I've got 2 sections for my monitors. I'm going to go ahead and add synchro backups for good measure. Now, if I go to this policy overview, this is something that's completely new as well. This is the default view for all policies, and this is a read-only view of everything that this policy does, and most importantly, nothing that it doesn't do. So it's always very simple now to see at a glance exactly what's happening. Now, for Synchro folks that are already familiar with our existing policy structure, all of this is effectively exactly the same as what you had before. There's no new checks and monitors. Nothing is going to behave differently. All of your old policies will continue to work on the new model. There is one exception to that, and that is a new item that we've added. Let's do this one. And we're going to call this states. In the old model, you had 2 states. You effectively could check it and it would enable it. And if you unchecked it, that's ignoring it. It means that the policy doesn't consider it at all. Today, there's going to be 3 states. This is enabled, same as before. This is now disabled, and that's important to understand. And when I show you the inheritance tree in a minute, what this is going to say is once it hits this level in the inheritance tree, if this particular setting is enabled somewhere higher, this is now going to explicitly disable it for the level it's sitting at and then every level below it. And then if you didn't want to have it considered on the policy at all, you just don't add it. So anything that you see sitting in this list or anything else that's not highlighted over here, they're just ignored from the policy completely. So that's the policy builder. This is the way that you're actually going to manage policies at customer level. So this is an actual customer record, and we've added this new assets and policies folder here, which is where you're going to do all of the assignment aspect of policy management. Every single customer, regardless if they're brand new, they're going to have a single folder at the top. We call this the top level policy folder, and it's going to match the name of the customer. This is immutable, so you can't delete it, you can't edit it, rename it. It's always going to be fixed for every customer. And you'll see here that I actually applied a policy to this, and I just named it top level policy. This is basically anything that I want to happen at every single asset underneath this customer, regardless of how complex this tree is going to become. If it's at the top, it's going to flow down or cascade down, whatever word you like, to everything else that falls below it. So this is the common stuff you're going to want to do if you've got like onboarding scripts for new assets, or you want everybody to have AV and backups. This is where you put your universal top level stuff. Now, you'll notice that it gets applied at the folder level, and we're no longer applying policies directly to the assets in a one-to-one relationship like we used to have. So again, I could put assets directly under this folder, or I could put additional folders under this folder and group them however I want. So this is a little bit more of what a realistic customer would look like. I put 2 folders underneath the customer, and I've still got my top level folder being applied at the top. And I did a folder for servers and a folder for workstations. Now, normally I would have a server specific policy and a workstation specific policy, but I just want to simplify this a little bit so you can understand how the inheritance model is actually working. So at this level, obviously anything that's in this top level policy is applying. However, at these sub levels, this is where inheritance takes over. So this at top level policy is getting added in with this policy, which just adds Bitdefender or adds MC stuff depending on the level that we're at. That merges together to form something we're calling an effective policy. And you can view the effective policy at any level or even at the asset level within any given customer structure. So if I were to show you the effective policy of my top level here, this is going to be a replica basically of everything that is at my top level policy. It's the only one being applied. So I've got some monitors, I've got splash top, a system tray, and then Windows updates and third-party updates. Now, if I was to do it at the servers level, you're going to see that those policies get combined. So now I have antivirus, and I apologize, this is a demo account, so I don't have Bitdefender physically wired up. But you'll notice that everything else is the same as it was before. This just added Bitdefender to the effective policy. Same thing if I were to view for workstations. It's going to be all the same stuff, but now instead of Bitdefender, I now have MCSoft. Everything else is the same. So that's how the tree works. So within the tree, this is what an actual asset looks like. And you'll notice that you can actually assign a policy to an asset. So if you've got one thing that is specific to a very specific asset for whatever reason, you can go ahead and put it into a policy, assign it directly to the asset, or more commonly, you're probably going to have something that you want to disable at one specific asset level. And you can also do that here as well. Once you drill into it a little deeper, you'll notice that you can actually drag assets around. So I've got my workstations folder, and then if I want to add backups to it, I just made a backups folder and I threw a policy that enables backups onto this folder. So I can just drag my demo workstation I've got here into this folder. And now it's going to have everything that was from this level and everything from this level, same as before. Now it's actively deploying backups. If I move it back, now it's going to remove backups. It's just going to take whatever is in each given level and apply it to whatever the assets that you have within that level are. Now you can also do this for overrides, as I mentioned. So this folder here for disabled tray is going to have a policy that hides the tray icon. So at every other level, because it's coming from my top level policy, they're all going to have a tray. But if I was to move this asset into this folder, it's going to do all the same stuff as it was before, but now this is going to override the tray icon. So if I look at its effective policy now, sorry, I need to save it before it will do that, but this will effectively disable the tray icon. Now, if you wanted to do it at the asset level, that's also possible. So if I remove this policy from this tray and I can instead just apply it here, now it's only going to happen to this asset instead of happening at a given folder. You could even put it at the entire server level folder if you wanted, where it's going to disable the tray icon on all your servers, because theoretically it's not really necessary at the server level. So it's important to understand that these policies, whether you're adding stuff, you're overriding stuff, it can happen at the asset level, it can happen at any given folder level, or it can happen at the very top level. So this is a little bit more of a real example. I took this from my old MSP days. For those of you that don't know, I had a 12-tech MSP I ran for 6 years. So a lot of these examples are very, very real to me. And this particular customer had two offices. They had an East Coast office and a West Coast office. We started with just the West Coast office, which was great. If you don't know, Synchro has a very, very in-depth live chat functionality, and we taught this customer and most of our customers to use that for ticket ingestion. We preferred that. It worked better for us over email to ticket until they decided to open up this East Coast office. Because we were also on the West Coast, these folks would come in at 9 o'clock, they would try to live chat us up, and we wouldn't respond for 3 hours. It didn't give customers the best experience. And then what would happen is we would go ahead and respond, and they'd be at lunch, they'd respond, we were at lunch, and something which should have taken like 5 minutes wound up bleeding into the next day and screwing up our SLAs. So what we did was we said, okay, we need to handle this East Coast office differently. And so we taught them to do ticket ingestion by email to ticket, and we hid the tray icon for this entire office, meaning they're no longer going to be able to live chat with us. The West Coast office was the same as before. So other than that, when you break up the office, it's pretty much going to be the same as what you'd expect. We've got servers with the server policy. We've got workstations with a workstation policy. Just note that anything contained within these two folders are going to have their tray icon hidden because of this policy here. Now, in my West Coast office, I didn't assign a different policy. So basically, whatever's here at the top level policy, it's also being applied here, which means they are going to have a tray icon. I've also got my servers and I've got my workstation, same as before. And then this customer came to me and said, hey, listen, I know you said you weren't really going to do our home computers, but I'd really like it if you did my home computers. That stuff happens. So fine. I added a home computers folder here, but you'll notice that I also hid the tray icon here. And that's because I don't want people live chatting me from home at 11 o'clock at night, because you know that's what they're going to do. So I just turned it off for them. So again, it's important to know that here I'm only doing it to one subset of assets within the West Coast office, but here I'm using the same exact policy to do the same exact thing, but it's going to apply to an entire office and everything that falls underneath that. So this is a migration scenario. I want to explain to all the existing Synchro folks what's going to happen when this rolls out. First of all, when it rolls out, it's not physically being enabled on your account. If you go into your admin settings under RMM preferences, and this will be in the in-app notification you receive, there's going to be an opt-in. And that's because billing changes are updating a little bit in terms of recurring invoices. And we wanted to make sure that folks had ample time to make whatever changes they felt necessary before they roll this out onto their account. Not to mention, if you're in the middle of some major project, you don't really want to be dealing with a UI you're not extremely confident with yet. So it'll be a toggle option. You'll have 30 days to do it, or we will force it on for you. But other than that, you can turn it on anytime in between as you see fit. Once you do it, it's a one-way migration, and then you're permanently on the new system. So what we're going to do as part of the migration process is we're going to go into every single customer that you have, and we're going to look at every single asset on that customer and find out how many policies are actually being applied at this customer level. In this instance, there was just two, my servers policy and my workstations policy. So we're automatically going to create folders matching those policy names. So I've got one for servers, one for workstations. We're automatically going to apply the correct policy to the correct folder. And then we're going to take every single asset that you had that this policy was being applied to, and we're going to automatically move it into the respective folder. So what we're actually doing is we're taking everything from the old model, we're moving it onto the new model, but none of your assets are going to change, or none of your policies are going to change. Everything is physically going to be the same as it was before. As time allows, you're probably going to want to go in and make some changes here. Like you're probably put some top level policies on here, probably for your more complex customers, build this structure out however you see fit. But the key is that you don't have to do anything on day one, because we do understand how crazy an MSP's day-to-day really is. And we didn't want you all to feel like you had to drop everything and start making a million changes on day one. Now, speaking to this, I know a lot of folks are probably already saying, dude, I've got thousands of customers. I don't want to go into each one and assign a top level policy. As cool as this is, that's a lot of work. I agree. So we added, if I can find it, one second. We've added this button here, and this is the same policies view you had before. This will allow you to bulk assign a policy at the top level, and it's going to warn you because this theoretically could change the policy structure of every single asset in your fleet. And you've got two ways to do it. The most simple way is I'm going to pick a policy out of my list, which would probably be my top level policy, and I'm going to go ahead and confirm, and this is going to override and set every single top level policy folder across every single customer that I have. Now, if you want to get a little more granular, typically what people are going to do is you're going to take all of your customers that have very, very specific and or complex needs, and you're going to manually set them up how you want. Those are the outliers. Everybody else is most likely the same. So if you check this, it's going to set any top level folder which isn't currently set already, meaning it's not going to mess with those ones that you custom set initially. So this will be here. This just got added a few days ago, but it is going to be here for launch, which again, should have give folks a breath of fresh air for those worrying that they had to do a million policy settings and overrides on day one. You don't. This is one of the last few things that we changed. We had a bit of a complex installer UI, so to speak, and we've vastly streamlined this, so it's super easy now. You're just gonna be like, I want to create an installer for my customer here. Now you can actually pick what policy folder you want to install the asset into, and you can put it at the top level, servers, workstations. You can even drop it into one of these specific ones that go as deep as you'd like. We'll just say the workstations folder. You pick your installer type, and it's super easy. If you want to have a public link, you got that. If you want to just grab the downloader, you've got that. So you can now actually have installers that will dump right to any specific folder level or even multiple folder levels within the same customer. So the last thing I want to go over is billing. For folks that aren't currently utilizing our billing, or for folks on another platform, Synchro is hands down the most dynamic recurring billing system on the planet. And that means that we can count just about anything dynamically. And what I mean by dynamically is if we're going to count assets, saying you've got a customer with 10 assets and you're billing them $100 an asset, great, it's $1,000. One of the notorious ways that MSPs burn money is by failing to update license counts or asset counts or bill by employee counts as things change. And inevitably, the customer would have been happy to pay, but you weren't billing because you didn't update your recurring invoicing. We set out to build a system where you never, ever have to do that. So every single time a recurring invoice on Synchro fires, we're going to go dynamically count whatever you tell us to count. And the accurate count at that moment in time is what they're getting billed for. So if you onboard a new office and this customer now has 10 extra assets, they're going to get billed for 20 assets instead of the 10 that they started with. Or you decrement some users, or they fire some employees, all of that's automatically handled without you having to do any of this. So just to give you folks a quick overview of the power that exists today within the recurring invoice module. As I mentioned, you can of course bill by assets and say, cool, I want to do $100 an asset. If you want to get more granular with that, you can build out a customized saved asset search and then bill specifically off of that. So if you only want to bill for a subset of assets, no problem. If you want to bill for custom asset types or even SNMP devices, you can do that as well. And you can put as many dynamic counters on a single invoice as you want. So if you want to bill for 3 different saved asset searches 3 different ways, not a problem at all. You can easily do that. We do the same thing for contacts. We'll count every single employee they have, bill accordingly. Or if you want to maintain employees that were terminated to keep a history of them in your Synchro instance for whatever reason, you can even put custom fields on them. So I added one for employee status. And it's like, cool, I only want to bill for employees that are active. I'm going to ignore all the inactive ones because they're obviously no longer with the company. We did this for Synchro backups. If folks don't know, we have a pretty killer file and folder backup solution. And you can go super crazy with this one. You can bill by license count, or you could even say like, hey, in this contract, they're going to get 25 licenses included, and anything over that, I'm going to bill them $15 a piece for it. You can also do the same thing for cloud storage. You can give them, say, I'm going to bill you, I'm going to bill you whatever, 20 cents a gigabyte, 25 cents a gigabyte, whatever you want, or I'm going to give you a global credit of 1,000 gigabytes or a terabyte, and then anything over that is going to be a quarter. You can even say, I'm going to give you a per asset credit where for every asset, I'm going to give you 50 gigabytes of storage for free, and then I'm going to bill you 25 cents over that. Whatever you want to do, it's here. And then we also have one for our native Splash Shop integration, where if folks want to enable this so your users can remotely access their own machines, you can do that. And this can actually count that and again, dynamically bill a recurring invoice time. So anyways, the reason I wanted to go into this was because we added a very, very cool one for policy inheritance, which is policy folder. So I'm just going to put labor as my product. You can build this to whatever product you want. For my MSP, we always build it to labor because this is basically contract labor revenue. And then since we already know the customer, because I already set it on this invoice, it's just like, cool, what folder do you want to bill for? All right, well, I'm going to bill for my servers, and I'm going to bill $150 a piece. And I'll go ahead and add this to the template. And you can see that I currently have one asset, so it's going to bill them 150 bucks if nothing changes by the time this recurring invoice fires. Well, that's great. So now I'm going to do the same thing for my workstations. So same thing, going to bill it out to labor, and I'm going to pick my workstations folder, and I'm going to bill 100 bucks for my workstations, let's say. Okay, fine. So now what's going to happen is anything that is contained within these 2 folders are getting dynamically counted. So right now they're going to get billed $250. If I put another server on there tomorrow, the next time this invoice fires, they're going to get billed out at $400. So again, the important thing to know is that you literally set this once. And if you're not changing your prices, you will never have to go back to this again and mess around with it. And now it's as easy as dragging assets into whatever folder in whatever structure that you specifically want to bill for. So that's kind of the feature end to end. Now I'm happy to take on any questions that y'all have. I'm sure you've got a bunch.
Yes. Do you mind? Can I just fire them your way then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right, perfect. So first question, Casey wants to know if there's a way to sign up for the policy inheritance rollout.
Oh yeah, I knew that was going to start. Yeah,
I figured I'd let you answer it live because I think we're going to get it.
Yeah, so if you're saying you want to be like in the first wave of it, if any of you folks are on the Facebook group, I reluctantly say this, but go ahead and just PM me and send me your Synchro subdomain, and I will see if I can get you in the first group without promising, as long as you never told anybody that I said that.
It's being recorded. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Alistair wants to know, is it a one-to-one mapping between folders and policies, or can multiple policies be applied to a given folder?
It's a one-to-one with, so one policy per folder. You can have as many folders at any given level as you want, however, and then you could go 5 subfolders deep. So normally you would break it at your top level, you'd break it at a site level, maybe servers and workstations, and then you've got actually 2 extra levels beyond that if you need them.
Okay. And can you show, do you mind, Andy, showing policy inheritance for the third-party updates? So it's essentially the same as what we offer now through Chocolatey. But do you want to maybe just show how they would apply that?
Yep. So basically the way it's going to work is the third-party updates is just one single setting. So I only have one third-party patch policy on here. If you had multiple for any reason, once it goes down in the inheritance tree, so let's say that I had it at my top level policy here. If you want it to be something different, I could put a policy here that has a different third-party patch. Like I said, I just have one, but if I put something else, it's going to go ahead and apply to that. While we're on that topic, there is a couple items which are additive. And what I mean by that is if I added a, let's say a script schedule, let's just do this was a test script I was working with. If I have this at this level, and then I have a different script at a different level, by the time it hits the asset, all of that's getting merged together in an additive way. So if you've got three policies across scripts across three different policies, once it hits the asset, all three of those scripts will be there. Windows Updates works in the same way because Windows Updates lets you have multiple stuff in here. So if you have it like this, that's fine. If you've got one at one level and then you've got a different one at a different level, those become additive as well. So that's how it kind of flows down in the inheritance tree.
Perfect. Okay. Question from Aaron. Can you instead have a tray menu without the chat button for the other office, i.e. can the folder have different tray menus?
Yes, if you want to get really, really in depth and blow up my perfectly laid out example there, yes, you could do that. That would be a good way to do that. The tray also works in an additive way though, however. So if you've got like your core tray at the top, it's not really an override method, it's only additive. So if you did have a scenario like mine, I guess in reality, if you want to do it the way you're talking about, you would remove it at the top level and you'd make one specific to the East Coast office and then one specific to the West Coast office, with the only difference being the chat, being enabled for one and not the other. But yeah, that's a good call out. I'm glad that you noticed that.
Way to go, Aaron. And then for Lane, is it possible to perform an action like run an ad hoc script to the asset folder, including all assets below it? That's the first part of the question.
I'm thinking about that one. Tell you what, give me 2 seconds because I need to see if that was something that we kicked around. I need to make sure that got added in before I get anybody super excited about saying that, yes, we can do that. But
perfect.
Go ahead on to the next one.
Yeah, the next one, and I haven't looked at this either. Is it possible to report or break down reports based on the folder structure?
If you want to ask a follow-up, like I'm kind of curious what your use case is. Like, what is it you're physically trying to accomplish there?
Perfect. And then I might also have a follow-up question for David. Are we going to keep the verbiage assets and policies? I keep clicking that to view the assets list, then realize I have to go to assets and RMM. So I believe it's always been assets and RMM as far as the tabs across the top, and policies will stay its own section as well, right?
It will, yeah. And I think I know what you're getting at. And I'll say this, I wanted to go further in policy inheritance in terms of how you visualize assets and how they're associated with customers. So we actually did such a good job of that tab that now everybody's like, hey, I don't like the list of assets. Like, I want this to be the main view. And that's something that we're heavily discussing. We didn't want to include it here because honestly, this thing touched so many systems and we wanted to nail the management part of the policies first before we delve into that. But I know what you're after. And I do agree, if there's a way to make that happen, I'm going to do it.
Perfect. And then just more follow-up from the initial question from Lane, Andy. We stage updates through different groups, for example. Other systems might have different compliance requirements as well. And then the additional follow-up is, for this reason, it would be convenient to report on them in different buckets because they have different policies and requirements.
Tell you what, if you want to send them my email address, and I'll take that one offline and get more into it, because I think I still need to understand more. It's not going to be there today, but if you kind of go into depth and we'll go back and forth and we can figure out what makes the most sense.
Okay.
And then, sorry, really quick, Crystal, I got an answer to the other thing with the scripts. It did make it in, so it is here. So you'll basically, where's that customer I had? If I wanted to run it on everything in the East Coast office, for example, I could go ahead and do that. This is a script. We've also added this to saved asset searches. So if you're doing a saved asset search, you can now do it by customer and then policy folder. And we've also added this to automated remediation, so you can do it based on whether or not the asset that fired a particular RMM alert existed in a particular folder or folders.
Perfect. That's awesome. It's pretty slick. Is there the ability to clone a policy to a new client? So I know you can clone policies, so you can just assign that to a client, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you would just dupe your policy, and then if it's, keep in mind that there no longer is really a need for customer specific policies. And then that's, unless that specific customer has an exception, like in my example where I didn't need to chat and I needed to get rid of it, but it's not really customer specific. So you can have one policy at the top level that applies to every customer you want and just reuse it as often as needed. But if you want to like work off of one to duplicate and then change it, yes, you could do that and just assign it out wherever you want it.
Perfect. Okay, let me read this one out for you. William wants to know, how does it handle changes to the base policy? i.e., I make standard customer on Monday and apply it. Tuesday, I want to change standard scripts. Do I have to reapply it all out, or do I edit the policy and they all get the changes?
The second one, you would edit the policy and they'd all get the changes. Now, the only difference between yesterday and we'll say today is that previously that would happen relatively instantly. Now, there's been some precautions put into place, because if you have like thousands of assets, obviously syncing all those at the same time is not really the best method to do that. So it's spread out over like 5 minutes, but realistically within a few minutes, unless you have like thousands and thousands of assets, is what you should expect there. Yeah, so if you move stuff around and then you save it, it's going to apply your changes. And then if you change an actual policy, that gets applied to your entire fleet if it applies.
Perfect. Okay. Lane, on another pain point they've had in the past, in trying to follow SDLC practices and deploy policy updates in stages, meaning, for example, to have a dev group in every customer where we deploy policy changes first before hitting the other assets to the customer. We'd have policy dev version 1.5, and we want to replace it with the policy dev 1.6. Is there a way to bulk replace policy assignments in this way?
I'm thinking about the question. Yes, but it would depend, because you could change the policy at the folder. But if you've got like two folders, one for like a staging, if you want to call it that, and then one for actual release, you could do it that way. But you'd have to move all of the assets from point A to point B. If you're doing it where you just want to override a staging policy change with an actual live change, you could do that too, but it's a little bit of a manual affair. So you couldn't say, I only want to do this to 50% of my assets. I mean, you could create some clever way of doing that within the confines of the system, but I know there's stuff out there where it's, go ahead and throw this to 10% of my fleet. Let's see what happens before I start rolling it out to the rest. It doesn't have that. And if I didn't totally answer your question, let me know, but I think that's what you're after.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome. Okay. Jason wants to know, are SNMP devices automatically counted as an asset? And this was asked when you were talking in recurring invoices.
Yeah, so no, not by default, but you can. So if I was to do an asset counter, Synchro device is what we call all physically deployed agents. So it would be anything with a Mac or Windows, basically. So that would just count those. Anything else, and this could include custom devices. You could just, so I just made this computer one just to do stuff that we've offboarded, but let's just say you want to bill for routers because you're crazy, whatever. So I'm going to bill for every router. You can do that and just say, okay, I'm going to bill $50 for every router, and it will dynamically count that. And because you can have as many line items on an invoice as you want, you could theoretically go and, sorry, I don't know why that didn't get added there. I must have not saved this. But you can add as many of those to the recurring invoice as you want. So yeah, as many custom devices in any way you want.
Okay. And while you're in reoccurring invoices, there's another one that just says, how would you bill the same? Okay. How would we bill the same policy, either monthly, quarterly, annually, etc.? Do we need a separate policy or product for each, since the amount you are billing for that period is different?
Sorry, I'm reading this one again.
I'm interpreting it that, like, some customers, it's the same policy, but some customers they bill monthly, some customers they bill annually, so it's different prices. So they're charging different, but it's the same policy, but they're charging.
Yeah. So I see what you're saying. So yeah, that's super easy to do. So what you're seeing here is specific to a specific customer, meaning this is this standard customer example that I was using. So you can set up whatever frequency you want, and if you want to bill for the same policy or policy folder, well, you'd be billing for policy folder, but assuming it was the same across your customers, sure, you could bill one quarterly, you could bill one annually, you could bill one monthly, and just change the price accordingly on each recurring invoice. So if you want to bill quarterly and say instead of $100 a month, it's now $300 a quarter, it would still dynamically count them when that recurring invoice fires and just bill $300 instead of $100. So that's definitely possible, sure.
Perfect. Okay. I think the answer is no, but can you have the system tray only showing during certain hours for clients?
No. I'd like to hear the use case for that though, because that sounds kind of cool. But no, today you cannot.
Okay. All right. And then great question, Steve. Similar to what you just demoed with scripts, can broadcast messages be used in the same way? Like, can you send a broadcast message by folder?
99% sure, yes. You guys are really asking the complex ones today.
I love these questions.
Yeah. So I'll tell you in a second here. Let me see. I'm pretty sure we have it there as well, though. Yeah, you can. So that'll now be a thing. And actually, I should start calling that out in these demos, because that's a pretty cool feature. And the fact that you can dump it to a certain subset of assets in a single click is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. And I believe the answer is yes. If I edit a policy, does it roll those changes out to any folder across any customer that policy is applied to?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yeah, Aaron, about the system tray, his thought was having chat, like having the system tray icon only during business hours, because it would include chat and then it would go away.
Okay, no, and that's an interesting idea. The one thing you can do is we do have like a thing that's built into it. So if you don't respond like within, I don't know what it is, I think it's 3 minutes, it will put up a message that you want. You could even say like, hey, we normally respond within an hour, within 2 hours, between our business hours of X and Y. So that's one way you could get around that, I think.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We've also gotten really creative with, just because those are so granular, where you could have after hours ticket that it does like, like you could actually name it that, whether the customer uses that specific option or not. It's kind of nice to be able to customize those.
Yep,
awesome. Well, Andy, you handled all of those questions so well. Thank you very much. Oh, hold on. Oh, okay. Another vote for the chat for business hours. So cool. Definitely noted.
Yeah, and so again, we're going to start rolling this out for folks possibly as soon as tomorrow. Don't get mad if that's not true. Again, I never said anything about messaging me to get in the first wave. That definitely never happened, recorded or not. But yeah, really excited to get this out to everybody. This is probably the biggest thing we've ever done, and it's definitely the biggest thing in scope we've ever done. So we're really, really excited at the power this is going to bring for every MSP at any level. It's great.
Absolutely. Yes. I think we're kind of slowing down, but if you want to answer just a few, Rob did hop in late. This has been recorded, Rob, so we have covered this. We currently bill based on RMM policy. If I do nothing, will my billing still work?
Okay. So there is a feature that was deprecated called RMM packages. We sent out a couple notices about that already. So those need to go away. That will not function when policy inheritance goes live. The second component to that is if you bill by specific policy today, and it's the same thing if you use a saved asset search with a policy as a filter, those won't function anymore. Now we're giving people a 30-day breath. We put some stuff in place to try and reduce the amount of things you'd have to change on day one. So you will need to update them. You'll have 30 days to do it. And the way that you'll be doing that is you want to update those to use the new policy folder method.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Crystal.
The last thing I was seeing was, so Andy, if you were starting today, how would you do your folders?
Yeah, the first thing I do is really spend some time getting your top level policy down. I mean, that's the thing that's going to deploy to almost everything you ever do in almost every situation you ever do. And then from there, it depends. I don't know, your MSP size or your customer type. The most common scenario is I've got to set up for servers, I've got to set up for workstations, and that's the only time that you'll have any of these exceptions. Now, if you're one of those folks that also handles like home computers for businesses or handles home computers in general, they're typically going to all be the same. So you might want to have like a residential policy, so to speak, and that just gets applied at those customers' top levels. If you ever want to shoot me a note on Facebook, I can help you structure that if you want to let me know the ins and outs of how you're structured. It's just hard to answer without knowing your size and your customer capability.
Okay, so let's take this last one. Dale says, wait, can you confirm that policy billing again? I used to use the RMM package, but in the email it said we should now use asset policy search for these invoices. So they redid the invoices.
So here, what the email was suggesting was this. This is one way to do it. I'm just going to go into any one of these here. So you no longer have this policy section here. It's not because I have obviously the policy inheritance enabled. So what we're suggesting here is that if you're billing RMM packages, you want to go in and put a custom field on those specific assets, and you can name it whatever you want, but probably want to match it to whatever your RMM packages were called. And then you can go in here and if you're like, I don't know how you would add it, if you want to do it as a custom text field or a drop-down field, and you can be like, is package is this or package is this, and make a saved asset search. And then within your billing structure, there is a way to say asset counter, and then you could pull up that saved asset search. And so that's how it was going to be built. The other option you have is, again, you can hold off rolling out policy inheritance for up to 30 days to make sure you can make these changes. You can wait till we roll this out and then just switch them all to the policy folder method, which is the method that most folks, I think, are going to use. So same thing, if you're on Facebook, just shoot me a PM there if that isn't clear, and I can go over that with you in a little more detail.
Okay, well, perfect. Is there anything last you wanted to end this with, Andy?
I don't think so. I know that I saw a question there about what comes next after policy inheritance. Mac support is something that we've been working on. So we've got some heavy duty scripting stuff that's going to basically bring it on par, our Mac agents on par with our Windows agents. And then we've got our native splash top, and that's basically going to bring Mac out of beta into kind of like into full release. And then as far as next year goes, I'm pushing hard to be able to do a fireside chat this year in December where I get to leak all sorts of exciting stuff, but I think I'll save any other comments for that so I don't spoil the fun and surprises.
Yes, the fireside chat last year was very fun. I liked it. I just like recalled that and saw our fire backgrounds and everything. So awesome. Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Andy. Thank you all for joining us today. We will be doing this again on the 17th, right, Andy? Or let me look.
The 16th.
16th, yes, the 16th. So we will be doing this again, 10 a.m. Pacific on the 16th. So please join us again if you have any questions. Andy will also be with us at open office hours again. And then lastly, this has been recorded, so it will be posted on our YouTube channel here shortly. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Enjoy policy and inheritance. We'd like to hear what you think. But other than that, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.